They look like they've got it all figured out, cold, confident, in control. But when the curtain falls and no one's watching, what's left? A shell, an echo, a prison built from lies. You think narcissists are powerful. The truth is, they're drowning behind closed doors. Behind the mask of arrogance and control, narcissists live in a quiet chaos they don't want you to see. They appear bold, calculated, and untouchable, but internally, they're consumed by a storm of insecurity, fear, and self-loathing. Today, we're pulling back the curtain to expose what they never want you to understand, the emotional fallout they keep hidden. The narcissist's entire identity is a performance. They curate personas like an artist paints illusions, designed to impress, manipulate, dominate. But here's the catch. When your life is a lie, it takes everything to keep it together. Behind closed doors, they're exhausted. Every fake smile costs energy. Every staged victory deepens the void. Eventually, even they can't tell who they are. That's the tragedy of the narcissist life. They believe their mask is their salvation. They think the role they play is the thing that earns them love, respect, admiration. So they become masters of camouflage, chameleons in every room, adapting their tone, their posture, even their core values to suit the environment. They become whatever wins them praise in that moment. But the more they shift, the more they lose touch with who they truly are. And over time, something terrible happens. The mask becomes more real to them than the person underneath it. They forget what authenticity even feels like. This isn't just about arrogance. It's about fear, deep, unrelenting fear that if people saw who they truly were, they'd be rejected, ridiculed, forgotten. So they build their identity not on substance, but on showmanship. But here's the problem. You can't fake wholeness. You can't manufacture peace. And no matter how strong the outer image looks, the internal structure is always unstable. The more they fake, the more they frack. The more they impress, the more they implode. It's an emotional bankruptcy. And sooner or later, the debt comes due. They may walk into rooms with pride, but they walk out of them with panic. They may speak like they're full of certainty, but they live in quiet doubt. Because the applause never lasts, the admiration always fades, and the moment it does, they're right back to where they started, scrambling to rebuild the lie before someone notices the cracks. It's a cycle of desperation dressed in designer confidence, and eventually it all begins to collapse. Think about what it means to constantly perform, to never rest, to never be safe enough to just be. That's not power. That's prison. That's not strength, that's suffering. And when that grand illusion finally starts to fall apart, when people stop responding, when control slips through their fingers, they don't feel free, they feel exposed, unraveled, terrified, because the illusion was never built to last. It was built to survive the moment, not sustain a life. The truth is, no human being is meant to live behind a facade forever. It's exhausting, it's dehumanizing, and it always ends in emotional collapse. That's why the illusion isn't sustainable, because eventually reality knocks, and when it does, the person behind the mask has two choices. Either double down on the lie and spiral deeper into emptiness, or finally courageously face the truth they've been running from all along. Only one of those paths leads to freedom. And that's the path that starts with authenticity. They build their value on external validation, applause, admiration, and control. But when the world doesn't clap, when the audience gets tired, they panic, because deep down they know without your attention, they're nothing. That's the trap. Real self-worth is built on truth, discipline, and integrity, not manipulation. And without those pillars, everything crumbles. You see, a narcissist doesn't just crave attention, they depend on it like oxygen. Their identity isn't rooted in who they are, but in how they're seen. It's a life lived in mirrors. Every compliment feeds the ego. Every like, every praise, every reaction becomes proof that they matter. But what happens when the lights go out, when no one is looking, applauding, or admiring? What's left? A hollow space. One they're terrified to face, because in that silence the truth screams. And the truth is, they don't know who they are without the illusion. They dress themselves in titles, achievements, exaggerated stories, and curated personalities, not because they're proud, but because they're afraid. Afraid that if they showed you the raw, unfiltered self, you'd walk away. So they construct castles in the sand, convincing others and themselves that this facade is real. But no matter how high you build, if the foundation is false, it won't stand. Life has a way of testing what you're built on. And when adversity hits, when failure, rejection, or exposure comes, it doesn't just bruise them, it destroys them. Because their worth was never internal. It was borrowed, temporary, and conditional. People who build themselves on truth don't fear silence. They don't shrink in solitude, because their worth isn't for sale, and it doesn't vanish when the crowd walks away. They've done the hard work, the soul searching, the breaking, the rebuilding. They've sat in the discomfort of who they really are and made peace with it. That's where true confidence comes from. That's where real strength is born. But narcissists, trapped in their fragile echo chamber, never take that journey. They run from it. They dress it up, but eventually everything you ignore becomes everything that haunts you. This is the collapse you never see coming, the internal implosion, the panic attacks behind the smiles, the desperation behind the dominance. It's the slow erosion of a life lived for applause. And the tragedy? Many of them never escape it. They double down, get louder, colder, more controlling. Because it's easier to intensify the illusion than to dismantle it. But it's also more dangerous, because the longer you build on sand, the more catastrophic the collapse becomes. So here's the challenge, not just for the narcissist, but for anyone watching. Stop chasing validation. Stop outsourcing your value. Dig deeper. Ask yourself, who am I when no one's watching? If the answer is unclear, good, that means there's work to do. But it also means there's hope. You don't have to keep performing. You don't have to keep pretending. Build something that lasts. Build something that can't be taken. Build your self-worth on what's real, because what's built on truth never collapses. Narcissists live in a world that they meticulously construct. A world built on facades, masks, and false representations. They craft an image of power, invulnerability, and control. The people around them often admire what seems to be an unshakable self-assurance, believing that they possess everything that the rest of the world craves: confidence, success, influence, and admiration. However, beneath that facade lies a cold, dark reality that few ever get to witness. A profound loneliness that they desperately try to avoid confronting. For narcissists, vulnerability is a threat. It's not just uncomfortable, it's their greatest fear. Vulnerability exposes their cracks, their insecurities, and their deepest fears, and they can't allow that. They cannot allow anyone to see the person behind the mask. The moment they let someone in, they risk losing the power that they cling to. Vulnerability means opening the door to rejection, criticism, and judgment. Things that deep down they are terrified of. So they wall themselves off, emotionally disconnecting from others, building walls around their hearts that grow taller and thicker with each passing day. At first, this emotional isolation seems like a powerful strategy. The narcissist tells themselves that they are superior for needing no one, that they can thrive in solitude and be unaffected by the lack of true connections. They convince themselves that they are above the need for love, compassion, or emotional intimacy. But that's the illusion. The truth is, while they may suppress their desire for connection, The human need for real, authentic relationships never goes away. In fact, it only intensifies the longer they distance themselves from others. The more they build walls, the more those walls begin to suffocate them. The loneliness they experience is not the kind of solitude that allows for introspection and growth. It's a hollow, gnawing emptiness that begins to erode their sense of self. The more they attempt to maintain control and dominate every situation, the more they pull away from the people who could offer them the kind of love they desperately crave, if only they could open themselves to it. But their pride keeps them trapped in their own fortress, unwilling to show weakness or let anyone see that they too are human. As time passes, the loneliness becomes more pronounced. It moves beyond the occasional feeling of isolation and seeps into every corner of their existence. The narcissist's circle of relationships grows smaller, their support system weaker, until they find themselves surrounded by people who are only there because they've been manipulated or controlled, not because there's any genuine affection. In these moments, when the applause fades and the admiration is no longer there to prop them up, the reality hits hard. They are truly alone. The narcissist is stuck in a prison of their own making, a prisoner of their own ego, their own insecurities, and their own refusal to be vulnerable. Behind closed doors, when the world isn't watching, that loneliness is unbearable. It's in the silence. In the moments where the distractions and the noise of the outside world fade away, that the narcissist is forced to face the truth. They are not as untouchable as they want to believe. The mask they wear begins to slip, revealing the emptiness beneath, the fear that they are not enough, that they are unworthy of real love and connection, creeps in, but they will never admit it. They will never let anyone see how deeply they are hurting. Instead, they double down on their facade, trying harder to control, manipulate, and keep others at arm's length. Yet, no matter how much they hide, no matter how much they try to avoid the truth, the loneliness remains. It festers, it grows, and eventually it becomes their constant companion. The strongest mask will crack under the weight of isolation. The more they fight to keep it all together, the more the cracks will spread. And one day, when they can no longer hold it all in, they'll have no choice but to face the emptiness that they've been running from. The loneliness they've tried to avoid will be the one thing that forces them to confront who they really are and who they are without the mask. But will they be able to face it? Or will they retreat further into the emptiness, consumed by the very thing they feared the most? Control is like a drug for the narcissist, a constant source of stimulation and power. At first, it feels intoxicating, like a high that keeps them in a state of dominance, superiority, and invincibility. They believe that by manipulating the world around them, they can safeguard their fragile sense of self. Control is not just a strategy, it's their shield, their weapon, and their foundation. It creates an illusion of safety where they believe that if they hold tight enough, nothing can hurt them, nothing can breach their walls. But there's a catch. Just like any addiction, the more they seek it, the more it consumes them. With every person they try to manipulate, every situation they attempt to dominate, the narcissist builds a fragile tower around themselves, but instead of fortifying their foundation, it weakens it. The act of control takes energy, immense energy, and it drains them. The more they try to tighten their grip, the more the very thing they crave slips through their fingers. In their pursuit of mastery over others, they become prisoners of their own desire. The walls they put up to protect themselves only serve to trap them. They are constantly looking over their shoulder, expecting betrayal or failure, because deep down they understand that they've built their empire on an unstable, toxic foundation. What they fail to realize is that control is an illusion. They are not actually in charge. They are simply reacting to their insecurities, trying to impose their will on a world that doesn't bend to their every command. And when the world inevitably resists, they become frustrated, angry, and fearful. Every instance where their control is challenged only magnifies their internal chaos. They start second-guessing themselves, doubting every move, wondering if they've lost their grip on power, and they begin to feel the crushing weight of paranoia. This constant need to control their environment keeps them in a perpetual state of tension. They're on edge, hyper-aware of every change, every look, every whisper. They feel as though the world is conspiring against them, that every person is out to expose their vulnerabilities. Their minds race, caught in an endless loop of suspicion and distrust. The more they try to assert their dominance, the more isolated they become. Relationships suffer because they cannot allow anyone to simply exist as they are. They must control every narrative, every interaction, and every emotional exchange. Their partners, friends, and colleagues feel suffocated by the constant need for validation, constant micromanagement, and the overwhelming pressure to conform to the narcissist's will. And yet, the more they try to hold it all together, the more they lose the one thing they need to thrive: peace. True peace is not something that can be commanded, purchased, or controlled. It is earned through surrender, through accepting the chaos of life and trusting that not everything can or should be under their influence. But for the narcissist, surrender feels like weakness, and weakness is unacceptable. So they cling even harder, not realizing that their desperation to maintain control is in itself what is tearing them apart. Their inner world becomes a battlefield where every failure to control is seen as a personal defeat. The emotional toll is immense, and yet they persist, not realizing that the more they grasp at control, the more they lose touch with the peace they so desperately need. They sacrifice their mental health, their relationships, and their peace of mind, all in the name of a false sense of security, one that can never truly be achieved by controlling everything and everyone around them. Ultimately, it is this addiction to control that backfires. In their quest for dominance, they end up losing themselves. They lose the ability to enjoy life without the burden of constant manipulation, and they lose the one thing that would bring them true power: the strength to let go. Narcissists live in a world built on projection. They do not see people for who they truly are. They only see reflections of their own fears, inadequacies, and self-loathing. They accuse others of what they themselves are struggling with internally. It's as though they're constantly looking into a mirror, but instead of seeing their own flaws and vulnerabilities, they see them in you. It's a defense mechanism, a way to avoid the crushing weight of their own internal chaos. When a narcissist calls you weak, it's because they fear their own perceived weakness. They cannot tolerate the thought that they might be anything less than perfect, so they project their fragility onto you. They accuse you of not having the strength to stand up for yourself, because deep down, they know that their own sense of power is fragile. Their whole existence is built on pretending to be in control. But behind that facade is a soul trembling in fear. They are terrified of being exposed, terrified of being seen as less than extraordinary. So they call you weak to divert attention from the vulnerability they hide inside. When they call you selfish, it's because they are consumed with their own selfishness. Narcissists lack the capacity for true empathy. They see the world through a lens of what's in it for me, and they cannot fathom someone acting out of pure selflessness. But here's the truth: their selfishness isn't the result of strength. It's a symptom of deep insecurity. The narcissist operates under the belief that if they don't look out for number one, no one else will. They are not interested in genuine connection. They are interested in how much you can feed into their egos. They demand attention, admiration, and validation constantly. But when you don't give them that, they project their selfishness onto you as a way of deflecting from their own insatiable needs. This is the paradox of the narcissist. They seek to control, dominate, and manipulate others to feel secure, but the truth is that they are desperately insecure. They need to feel superior to everyone around them in order to compensate for the feelings of inadequacy they can't escape. Their inflated sense of self-worth is a facade built from fragile pieces of false admiration. If they were to allow themselves to see the truth, they would realize that their whole existence has been one big performance. But they can't afford to face that reality because it would shatter everything they've worked to build. They lash out at others because they fear that others will see through them, see the cracks in their armor, see that they are just as human as the rest of us. They can't stand the thought of being ordinary, flawed, or weak, so they project their fears, their doubts, their flaws onto you and anyone else who gets close enough. They accuse, they judge, they criticize, because it's the only way they know how to cope with the fact that they are not who they want to be. But the real tragedy is that in doing so, they only isolate themselves further. The more they push others away through their projections, the more they sink into their own prison of fear and insecurity. It's a cycle, one that only grows darker the longer they refuse to face the truth within themselves. And yet, they will continue to believe that it's the world around them that's the problem, not the reflection in the mirror. This is where the real power lies, for both you and them. If you are caught in the narcissist's web, understand that their attacks are not a reflection of who you are. They are a desperate cry for help, even if they will never admit it. For you, the power comes in recognizing that their projections say nothing about you. They say everything about them. And once you see that, you no longer have to be their target. You no longer have to carry the weight of their insecurities. You have the strength to break free from the illusion they've created. You have the ability to see the truth for what it is. And in doing so, you reclaim your power. If you've been wounded by a narcissist, understand this: their behavior wasn't your fault. It was their fallout. And if you've seen pieces of yourself in this mirror, don't run. Don't pretend, face it. The most powerful thing you can do is look your own brokenness in the eye and say, not anymore. Healing begins when the masks fall. Strength rises when truth stands tall. You were never meant to live behind a curtain. Tear it down. Step into the light.